Welcome to the Driller Newscast. I'm your host, Brock Yorty, and here's the latest news impacting the drilling industry this week. Announced in late March, the federal infrastructure bill will now include an additional $420 million for water infrastructure for Iowa, Minnesota, Montana, New Mexico, North Dakota, and South Dakota. It's a pretty big deal for the pipelines and the reservoirs and everything that's coming with that money that's going out. Next, in California, Governor Newsom strengthened the state's effort to conserve water as signs of continued drought impact the California water supply. It's a big deal when we look at what's happening with water well permits and the snowpack that we're starting to see the actual studies of what we got this year. Our main story for the week is on international water disputes and how these disputes mirror the same type of court cases that are happening in the United States. But before we drill into groundwater, one of our most important resources and topics we should be talking more about, let's talk job site safety. This week, I want to talk about hearing protection and noise mitigation and just hearing conservation. You know, I think about some of the great mentors I've had and what side I had to stand on to be able to have the conversation with them on the job site or at dinner where I needed to be so I could be able to talk to them, depending on what type of rig they ran, right platform or left platform, and the damage they did to one ear more than the other. So let's jump into the anatomy. The ear has three main parts: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer, the pinna, collects the sound waves and directs them inside our ear, right? What's happening is it's going through the middle ear, the cochlea, it's picking up that vibrations, and it's going and it's hitting the eardrum. And that's how we're able to hear. And when our hearing is at 100%, you know, the cilia is picking up those little vibrations and we're able to hear anything. But as we allow that sound impact to continue, over years of not using hearing protection, we're laying those little hairs down, we're damaging our ability to be able to hear different frequencies. So how do we fix this? Noise mitigation, right? We figure out what we have and we isolate that and we stay away from those. It doesn't work when we're standing on a platform or we're on a tight job site. So we need earplugs, ear muffs, noise canceling, hearing protection. These are all our options. This isn't 2000 anymore where it was a hard hat and steel-toed boots, maybe shirt optional to be working on that drill rig. Heck, you can open a smartphone app for decibel levels from NIOSH, or my smartphone will alert my watch, and my watch vibrates and tells me I'm beyond 85 decibels. If you don't have that, if you feel the need to shout to your drilling assistant across the table, it's likely beyond 85 decibels. If you're within 3 feet of somebody and you have to shout. So OSHA says 90 decibels in 8 hours will damage our hearing and that we need to have hearing protection. What's crazy is when we jump to 95 decibels, it's 4 hours, 100 decibels, 2 hours, 105, an hour. We get beyond that, 125 decibels, minutes, and we start damaging our hearing. So we have to use hearing protection. Earplugs are great. They will stop that impact and reduce that decibel level from that 90 or 95 back into the 70s range. Sometimes we need to use earplugs and earmuffs when we're beyond 105, or we know that this job site's 125 decibels. We need to have both to slow that impact. I know what you're saying. I can't hear everything that's going on in the rig if I have hearing protection in, and I need to be able to hear those nuances so I can make the changes. The equipment we have today, we easily can look at gauges. We can look at what's coming up out of the hole. We can look at all the rest of the aspects that's happening on a job site without damaging our hearing. We need to be able to retire enjoy our families, music, the birds, a good movie without alienating everybody in the house by having the TV so loud that no other conversation can have. So get a good set of hearing protection, get a plan in place, get tested, have the discussion, because you know what? As we start damaging it, we don't really realize it until it's too late. And that's in that last couple of years before we're about to retire and our hearing is shot. Be safe out there. Thank you. And now for the latest news in the groundwater industry, the drilling industry. In late March, the Department of Bureau of Reclamation will invest $420 million for rural water construction activities in 2022. This is the federal infrastructure bill. This investment in rural water systems includes work related to pipeline connections, construction of water treatment plants and intakes, pump systems, reservoir construction, wells, and other efforts to provide potable water to rural and tribal communities. $160 million of this will go to Eastern New Mexico rural water system for the construction of a transmission pipeline that will provide critical water supplies to approximately 70,000 people. Beyond that, $75 million will go to the Lewis and Clark rural water system in South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota. $57.5 million will go to the Rocky Boys North Central Montana rural water system in Montana. $51 million for the Garrison Diversion Unit of the Pick Sloan in Missouri Basin for North Dakota. $37 million for the recently authorized Judith Rural Water System in Montana. And finally, $7 million for Fort Peck Reservoir for the Dry Prairie Rural Water System in Montana. You know, a large majority of this infrastructure money will go for pipelines and reservoirs. We really need to be thinking about that as an industry, that this is where the infrastructure money is going, pipelines and reservoirs. As groundwater professionals, we need to know how we can help provide. We also need to know the stewards of the environment that we're impacting. You know, Eastern New Mexico uses the Ogallala. We talked about the Ogallala in Kansas. We've been talking about the Ogallala and the impact it's been having for years. And same with Texas with the Ogallala. You know, it's theorized that if we continue on the trend of pumping out of the Ogallala the way we are, in 15 years, it can be completely depleted to a point that we're not going to be able to use it. Now on to California. Last week, Governor Newsom signed an executive order for greater conservation, collaboration, and oversight of groundwater withdrawal in California. In the executive order, he stated groundwater use accounts for 41% of the state's total water supply on an average annual basis, but as much as 58% in critically dry years, and approximately 85% of the public water systems rely on groundwater as their primary supply. So he's asking for coordination between local entities that approve permits for new groundwater wells and local groundwater sustainability agencies. It's important to achieve sustainable levels of groundwater in critically overdrafted basins. He's asking for all residents to decrease water use by 15%. The order goes on to discuss inspections by stating the water board shall expand inspections to determine whether illegal diversions or wasteful or unreasonable use of water are occurring, and bring enforcement actions against illegal diverters, those engaging in wasteful and unreasonable uses of water. When access is not granted by the property owner, the water board may obtain inspection warrants. For us, Section 9 discusses new water wells or alterations to existing water wells, stating that medium and high priority wells must obtain written verification from a groundwater sustainability agency managing the basin that new proposed groundwater extraction would not be inconsistent with suitable water management practices already adopted. The bigger piece for us to the order: issuing a permit for a new groundwater well for alteration of an existing well without first determining that the extraction of the groundwater from the proposed well is, one, not likely to interfere with the production and functioning of existing nearby wells, and two, not likely to cause subsidence that would adversely impact or damage nearby infrastructure. However, this doesn't apply to wells that provide less than 2 acre-feet per year of groundwater. All right, for reference here, guys, an acre-foot of water is 326,000 gallons. There's a lot going on here, and this is why we continue to have these discussions about the Western United States. With the preliminary data coming in that the snowpack of the Sierras is at 38%, which is the third lowest amount in 2 decades. California is making decisions to be sustainable. Our 3 most populated states are California with over 39 million people, Texas at 29 million, and Florida at 22 million. Texas will be over 30 million before 2025, and Florida will be by 2030 at 30 million people. All 3 of these states are stressed on water and water infrastructure. This makes up half of our country's population in those 3 states with stressed water. Of course, these are the topics that are coming up, and we have to be involved with our local associations. We have to understand who's lobbying for and against us, and with our national associations. Welcome to our featured driller, or this week featured industry professional, pump guy, salesman, Greg Parker with Franklin Electric. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Greg.
Hi, guys. My name is Greg Parker. I'm a regional manager for Franklin Electric. I cover the North Central, so I cover Nebraska all the way over to Indiana, all the way up through Michigan, back across to Wisconsin, Minnesota, parts of the Dakotas, Missouri. So get to do some great traveling and see some great people, and just talk to a lot of good drillers and good pump installers. So thank you for having me on today. I do appreciate it. I know, you and I have been friends for a long time, and I keep talking about doing something with you. Today's the day, I guess. So.
It is. And you're right. We've known each other since I was a Bayreuth field guy and you were working for a retailer. So one question I've never asked you: how did this industry get into your blood?
Oh man, that's a great question. So I don't know if you know this, but my hometown is Toledo, Ohio. And I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood, very similar to the industry we're in. My father was an electrician at Jeep for over 40 some years. Right. So I've always been around electricity, always, whether it be, putting in a ceiling fan at some elderly ladies from the church, to roughing houses after I graduated high school. I've always been around electricity. And if a lot of our Franklin Electric products kind of revolve around that, right? Whether we have the sub-drive connect or Franklin motor, I've always kind of had a meter in my hand. I've always kind of had a great knowledge of how electricity works and worked with our products. So for me, it's just kind of a good way that, started to form me to where I'm at today, with working with electricity and working with our contractors. I've always been blessed with the gift of gab as well. So, finding the ability to talk to someone and find out their problems, get to the root cause and work on it. So, and other than that, Franklin's a great match for me. It's a way, revolves around electricity and just good people. And I've really enjoyed my time here. I've been at Franklin, I think May will be 15 years. So, and going back to our relationship, dude, we've known each other for 19 years. Think about that. We've been sharing, stories and, beverages. We'll say that, right? Keep it clean, for a very long time. So I appreciate your friendship.
Yeah. The relationships we make in this industry, that was the tough part about the last, 28 months was not seeing everybody and not catching up. And we're not that far away from Kalamazoo to Fort Wayne. So, when we do see each other, we do grab that beverage and we catch up. And again, when we're catching up, we're talking about family and
Right.
second degrees and that type of stuff. But I've never asked you, what's one lesson over the last 19 years that has really stuck with you from this industry?
Oh man. So talking about lessons, it's a great question as well. I always said you got to be flexible, and you got to be able to provide a service like no other. Sales is a different lifestyle. I mean, we have long nights, early mornings. We field phone calls all over. You got to, I guess my key lesson is you got to be flexible and provide a great service to your customer. There's, for instance, I have four kids, so I coach softball, I coach basketball, and there's one instance that sticks out where I knew a contractor was working on a drive, and I knew it was going to be a long day for him. And here I am coaching third base. Phone rings, I see it's him. I'm like, hey, I'm coaching third base. What's going on? Don't worry, nobody's on the base yet. Okay, if you hear me yell hold or anything like that, just don't freak out. And just stories like that, man. You got to be there for your people. I joke about this all the time. It makes it for interesting conversations, especially after you do experiences like that. I will say, one thing. Sorry, I've got my notes over here. One thing is the service part of it really is important to Franklin, really important to me, and that's kind of what drew me to it. I always joke about it. Service is never going to go out of style, right? That's my little joke. And you can pave your way, whether you're young or old, as long as you have service for your contractors or your customers. They're going to see you for who you are and actually feel like there's a bond and a relationship with you.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank Greg Parker with Franklin Electric for coming on. I reached out to one of my lifelong industry friends and wanted to hear his story, and that's how this came about. And if you'd like to be part of a featured driller, featured scientist, featured industry professional in the Driller Newscast, email me questions@askbrock.com and we'll set up an interview. It's 5 to 10 minutes. The main goal is to share knowledge and inspire more people to be in our industry with us. So thanks again, Greg. Thanks, Franklin Electric.
No problem. And I promise people, if you do an interview, it's not that painful. So good luck, man. I look forward to many years of this podcast interview style. It's pretty cool. Thank you for reaching out again.
Thanks, Greg. For our main story this week, I want to talk about international water disputes and how they very much mirror what's happening in the United States right now. The beginning of April, Chile and Bolivia headed to the Hague, Netherlands International Court to discuss water rights. See, Chile and Bolivia are fighting over water that originated in the Atacama Desert and flows into Chile into a larger river. And it's a remote spring in the Atacama Desert, which is one of the driest places in the world. I've worked both sides, Chile and Peru. And as I came from Antofagasta and drove into this large mine site for BHP, you could see where there had been a war between Chile and Peru and Bolivia, and the different, battlefield that was there over land and water rights. And so the Chilean argument right now is the basic principle of reasonable and equitable utilization of the fresh water. Our very first Driller Newscast, we had a story about Mississippi versus Tennessee and how Justice Roberts quoted equitable apportionment for the right for Tennessee to use that groundwater. So you can see we're seeing these doctrine all over the world, and we can jump right from there to middle of February when the Russians invaded Ukraine. In the first 3 hours, the first thing they did was blow a dam to a canal built by the Soviet era infrastructure for water to go to Crimea. And in 2017, in a dispute over this water, and fair payment to maintain the infrastructure between Ukraine and Russia. They couldn't come to a reasonable conclusion. So Ukraine blocked the canal, and it was 85% of the fresh water that went to Crimea. So again, you can see as we have this new war happening, there's a section of it that has very much to do with sustainability of water and infrastructure and crops. And beyond that, it's like looking at what's happening with the Colorado River right now. And as many states that are 100% invested in using that water, and seeing what we talked about with Salt Lake City wanting to use water as it goes downstream to the Great Salt Lake to help replenish it, when we have other states in Arizona and whatnot that need that water for cities who are increasing in size that are pulling water from that area. Egypt and Ethiopia are fighting over water of the Nile, and there's a large dam that Ethiopia set that has completely impacted a water crisis that will hit Cairo and all of the agricultural infrastructure that's happening there. And really, as we look at the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, the Tigris and Euphrates has been fought over for a millennia. And there's lots of heated discussions. And this situation of climate change, increased droughts, our population increase, where we'll be by 2050, 10.5 billion people. Water usage is life. And we're going to continue to see these type of disputes happening. In 2018, a new term surfaced for the water crisis. It was called Day Zero. It's the first time I heard it come out, and it, as a water professional in the industry and being a global humanitarian, thinking about how water is life and how we provide what we understand for our technology and abilities to be able to obtain water in our nation around the world. So, Day Zero, that is the day an inhabited area would start rationing water. Cape Town, Africa in 2018 was very close to that Day Zero. But there's plenty of other cities in the world, as we're increasing right now in population and the amount of water we need for agriculture and infrastructure and in industrial, and then just for drinking and consumption. These other cities facing this are Sao Paulo, New Delhi, Cairo. We just talked about what's going on with the dams and the fights over the Nile. Mexico City is sinking from the zone of depression for the amount of water that they've pulled out of the ground, because being one of the largest cities in the world, as they grew and sprawl, they drained lakes and changed how their water was for the area. And as we look at Mexico City and Cairo and New Delhi and Sao Paulo, and we go down the list, we see on the list Las Vegas, San Diego, San Antonio. I know what you're thinking. How can this be? We're one of the greatest nations in the world. How can we be impacting and not having enough water? We'll just drill deeper. We'll just pipe it in. Well, that's what's happening, is we're looking at the options of piping in, and we're looking at these options of deeper wells. But I want you to also think about the amount of injection wells and the amount of garbage we're pumping into the ground around the country, because we say there's not sustainable water down there. So let's get rid of, effluent. But it's coming. And our stewardship, what Governor Newsom just did, though not favorable with the price of drill rigs and all of the people that depend on drilling, to what we saw with Kansas and the Livestock Association and Farm Bureau not wanting more oversight on large irrigation wells, to the state of Michigan and the amount of water that's pumped, put into bottles, and shipped out of state. These are all things that will go to court. We will have bigger discussions about, and will all affect what we're doing. So there's two things I want you to think about here. One is, how are we promoting our industry and discussing the national water crisis we have in our country? And two, how are we participating and being part of the global water crisis and all of our neighbors and people around the world that need help? And I know there's some great people out there that are doing it, but more of us need to be. It's one more reason we need to be inspiring that next generation, because by the time 2050 hits, I'm going to be a very old man, and the possibility of getting on a plane and going to help out isn't going to be as easy as it is today. This has been the Driller Newscast, episode 6. 6 episodes. We're talking a lot about water right now because of the drought, because of climate change, because of the news. I also want to talk more about what's going on in geothermal and road building for the infrastructure bill and what new technologies are coming out. But that takes you reaching out to me, my email, questions@askbrock.com, and starting that discussion. I want to thank Greg Parker from Franklin Electric for coming on. Great industry friend that I've known almost my entire career on being outside of the family business. And those lifelong relationships are very important to us. And getting to share that knowledge and inspire the next generation is why it was great to have Greg on. If you'd like to come on, please contact me. I want to thank BMP Media and the Driller for allowing this series to continue and to see where it grows next. If you have a great story of a project or a life lesson that you want to share, this is a great platform to do it on. Check out thedriller.com, all the great stories that are coming out this week, and the Drilling Insight podcast, and Ask Brock. Have a great week, be safe, and know we really got to do a better job of water conservation and promoting the fact that it's not an infinite resource, especially with the way the climate has impacted what's happening. Cheers, everybody.